Yeah. Sup, girl?
Can I buy that album yet?
Nope. Just no.
I just want to like listen to that on the way here and just like
Prep for the podcasting.
Yeah, just psych out.
We are on episode 38 of the Faith and Whatever podcast. I am your host with the Providential Most, Josh Carmen, and today we are discussing the immaculate topic of Christian voting. Okay, if you're watching this, voting time is right around the corner. And whether or not you are aware, there are two candidates that are running in our duopoly system.
Duopoly?
Totally entrenched. It's too bloated to move. So who are we going to vote for as believers? Gary Stein. Those two people exist. They're awful.
Gary Stein?
Gary
exists.
Gary and Stein, right?
What about the guy with the boot on his head?
Donald Trump?
Burnin' Supreme.
Oh,
Yeah,
Burnin'
Burnin'
Supreme,
Supreme.
yeah.
Is he going to be in the ballot?
I hope not.
Write him in.
You can write people in, but really our topic of discussion today, again, is how should we vote as Christians? And we kind of figure we're at this point where, since we're not a nonprofit, we can tell you whatever we want, and we don't have to worry about our tax breaks being taken away.
True.
So that's neat. We got that working for us. So I just want to pose...
Also, by the way, if you do decide to do any write-ins, you should check the laws on write-ins in your state. They're different from state to state. In some states, it can actually take away all of your vote. So, like, not only the...
so if you write in, like, Krusty the Clown, and then
Right.
you vote for the 16 serious measures that we have on California's state ballot...
That's not true of California, but it is true of some states, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So pay attention to that. That's actually a really good piece of information. So we know that if you're in church ever...
By the way, is my microphone on?
You are on, yeah. You are
Or am I
super
being
on.
picked up by the area mic?
Nope. You're
No, you're super on.
Huh. Must just be my headphones.
Yeah.
Weird.
I've got you turned all the way up in your headphones.
I can hear you loud and clear.
So we talk about in church from time to time this idea of what a Christian candidate looks like, right? The Republican Party continues to... not the Republican Party, the Evangelical Church continues to pick candidate after candidate that they endorse and think is Christian, right? Before it was Bush because he was more Christian than Gore. Then it was Bush again because he was more Christian than Kerry. And then it was, who was 2008? McCain because he was more Christian than Barack. And then it was, who's the other guy? Romney.
So it sounds like you just...
because he was more Christian than
As long as
Barack,
you're,
even
as
though
long
he
as
was
you're
Muslim.
not a Democrat.
Yeah.
You mean Mormon?
Yeah. He was more Mormon than Obama. So we're sitting around figuring out what do we want to talk about, especially this close to election season, because this is going to be an important time. Maybe not so much the national thing. It's not going to affect us too much out here. We're already kind of in the John.
This world is already going downhill.
Yeah, and so where do we want to place and hedge our bets as as people? Do we want to support candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, or candidate D? And we always pick, right? If you've followed or listened to us for any amount of time, we did this episode a few months back, actually, that talked about like the 7 virtues a president is supposed to have, right? The 7 actual titles that your commander in chief, commander in such and such, whatever is supposed to have.
First of his name.
And so our thinking collectively said, how do we break those down and parcel them out on an individual Christian level? Now, we actually have some varying thoughts in this podcast episode there that we should and are excited to share. So I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Garrett. When you are picking a candidate for whom you are going to cast your worthless vote in California, who do you vote for? Your vote's not worthless, but you know what I mean.
Yes, it is.
Well, I mean, I think voting's important. I think you have a Christian obligation to care about the treatment and outcome of the citizens of your country. That being said, I don't necessarily know if there's a more Christian way to vote than the other when it comes to parties. Even when it comes to individual people, because there's so many sides and facets to an individual politician and someone running for a country that someone's pro could be just as strong as someone's con. So in other words, I'm not sure, especially in this election, if there is a more Christian vote.
I would put it this way, that if you were truly interested in voting for the Christian candidate, you would have to grassroots that candidate who's already an exemplary Christian and get them into the president. Like, not
what does grassroots mean?
What I mean is, don't look at the handful of people in the primaries or the two in the presidential campaign and pick the one you think is most like a Christian, but instead know somebody pre-politics who's an exemplary Christian and try to help propel them into a political campaign, which again is not very realistic.
Tebow 2020, here we go.
Yeah. And he might actually win.
Well, I don't know, he's a pretty likable guy.
And still not necessarily
lives.
And still not necessarily a good idea, because just because you find an exemplary Christian doesn't mean he's going to do the 7 roles of the president very well.
Sure.
Or she.
And so what it comes down to for me is I think it's a moot point. I don't think there is the Christian vote. I mean, there's people you can usually pick out as being absolutely not the Christian vote. But
I think there could be some theoretically.
Some but I don't think it's happened, really.
I mean,
out of serious options.
Well, and here's to say that you shouldn't always vote for a Christian over a non-Christian or non-Christian. But I think we're seeing the day in the next, 12 years that the first atheist, we'll have the first atheist presidential candidate. Now, that's not to say that.
Well, hang on.
Does automatically.
I mean, I would say. And of course, this is just my impression or my intuition, I should say. I think we've already had atheist presidents. They just didn't publicly face their atheism. Because that's a way of shooting your campaign in the foot up until recently.
Right.
Yeah.
So a couple questions there. So you touch on an interesting subject. Can we, as believers, vote for a non-Christian? Let's put that out there.
Yes.
We think it's not a big deal. You don't think it's wrong, or...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there's times we should and have to vote for a non-Christian because they're just the better candidate, or they're the only candidate.
It's not the Christian mission to put forth a Christian president.
Okay.
I think the president is a job that exists outside of Christianity. It has 7 roles, and if you're going to vote appropriately, you should vote according to who you think will do those 7 roles the best. Nobody will do them perfectly, but who you think will do them the best.
Right.
Chris, what do you think about the value of voting in a non-Christian?
About the value of voting, I think Jesus was kind of apolitical, really, right?
Well, that's why I'm asking you.
So I don't vote. I don't believe in it.
Okay. So
not a fan.
What's
you
that?
don't believe
not
in
a
it?
fan. Nope.
Okay.
How would you rather have the governmental system get
Nothing. I would rather have nothing at this point.
Like that inept.
I think there's some land between like Croatia and other countries that like has no government.
They're working on it. Lieberland.
Right.
Lieberland. Yeah.
Right.
Uberland?
Lieber.
Yeah.
What does Lieber mean in
Free.
German? Okay, free. Okay, fair enough.
Latin.
Like Libre.
Yeah.
All right, Liber Dad. Okay,
That's where we get the word liberty.
we have this idea that we shouldn't vote, right? Kind of being tossed out there. I'm not necessarily not a fan of this, because when I struggle with this, particularly in this election, right? I've seen Hillary's track record, not impressed by it. Think she's kind of snaky, right? Think she's not as honest as she would like to seem. Donald Trump's just a horrific human being and deserves to be nowhere near Pennsylvania Avenue unless he's building something overpriced right next to it. So yeah, right. And so these are the only 2 serious options that we have there. And so now I feel like I'm, as the average voter, who's somebody who wants to be well informed, who wants to do well, who wants to make a good decision.
I see what you're saying. I do want to make one nuance. These are the 2 serious options we have because this is how far we let it get, right? If all the people who are upset today had taken an active role in the primaries or even before the primaries, we would have 2 different options today.
Because in a democracy, the people get the candidates they deserve.
Right.
And so if people are the best argument against democracy, right, the average voter is why we shouldn't have democracy, probably.
Right.
But I want...
Democracy is just a soft form of communism.
So soft communism. It's like hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi. So I want to pick somebody who I think is going to best represent Jesus, right? But I'm also, as a Christian, torn because I understand that Paul talks about this idea of rhetoric of not imposing Christianity on people who want to live outside of the Christian realm.
I don't even think the government wants to be Christian.
And so,
I mean,
right.
I think I want the president who's going to best do the 7 roles of the president.
Even at the expense of what I would necessarily agree. So if President A does 4 out of the 7 roles better than President option B, who does 3 out of the 7 well, but President A has a desire to, I don't know, allow abortion to be legal, right? That's a huge Christian hot button issue there.
Abortion is already legal.
Right. I mean, continue it, further it, whatever it might be. Do I need to vote for President B
I think you need
Do I have a moral obligation?
I think
with
you
that?
need to take a wider look at how the government works. That when you're voting for president, you're voting for best president, but they're also going to be working with and against the Senate and the House of Representatives, and to an extent the Supreme Court. That you have to trust the system, that the idiosyncrasies of certain presidents, the uniquenesses we may not always find that we want, like the one bad thing you might say out of the 7, that the rest of the government sort of balances that out and slows down those oddities.
So is this reality, or is this question just a reality of which ethics I'm willing to sacrifice? Is that kind of what we think? Like, what ethics am I willing to compromise to live in a nation like this?
You could say that. I mean, you could vote on position as opposed to on person. I mean, I think one of the things that we are right now, and things that people are saying is that, who are you going to pick? And if you want, you can throw that out and just pick the positions that you want and where these people stand, because that, I mean, if that's more important to you, that's okay. I mean, it very well could be that regardless of who it is, you just want to pick the person who represents the decisions that you want to be made in government.
I would say that if the only way you can operate is to only operate based on who you think the best Christian leader will be, then you need to not throw yourself into politics or voting. You need to throw yourself into working via the church.
Okay. So that's a fair point. So does that mean at the expense of participating in the democratic system?
I'm just saying, if you can operate, if that's the way you have to operate,
sure.
that's where you operate that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what?
Some
do
of
we
us
do?
can do both.
Right. So for those of us that can't, so what do we do then if we hear people say, like, well, if you don't vote, you don't get a chance to complain, or you don't have a right to.
I don't agree with that.
Okay. So how come you think that's nonsensical?
Well, because I think there are 3 votes. There's yes, no, and
abstain.
And so those who abstain can still complain
because
yeah, but that was a form of voting. I mean, if you can't vote for Trump and you can't vote for Hillary and you can't vote for anybody else that you know of, that is your vote. You can't vote, and you can still complain about the results. I mean, this whole idea that if you don't vote, you can't complain is kind of ridiculous. We all live in this nation. We're going to deal with what this nation is. And not voting isn't necessary, because not voting is viewed as laziness. But there are people who don't vote purposefully, and they still have the right to have their voice.
Chris, that you would fall into that category, correct?
I was originally very apathetic because the first election I was old enough to vote in was Bush v. Gore. And we remember the Electoral College and the popular vote didn't match
534 votes.
I
he
voted
lost by
my
in
first
Florida.
one.
Yeah, and so that kind of just turned me off to all of it for a long time.
Yeah.
But then it grew to a purposeful abstaining, so to speak.
I'm in that same, but I'm not voting this year. It's the first presidential election that I have not voted on, so it's not laziness.
So what is your reasoning for not voting?
I just struggle ethically to put my vote behind either one of the candidates.
Your vote's your endorsement, right?
In some sense.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying
I
endorse
guess
this person.
You say that, but I mean, who's not mad at their candidate 6 months later, anyways? It's, I mean,
again, I would love a system where you could spend your vote as a no vote, because then that would simplify things for me. I mean, I would say no to Trump.
I'm not necessarily for Hillary,
right?
But I am against Trump.
So, spend my vote to negate a vote for Trump. That would be the system I would want.
I mean, that's probably feasible. I don't know.
How did Trump get negative 600,000 votes?
That would be great, wouldn't it?
It's a very conscious decision for me this year. And I'm not in a swing state. If I was in Ohio, maybe I would feel differently about my individual.
And so that is
what
a
I
reality.
can do matters.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would have to. When people disagree with it, they say, "What your vote does matter." I'm like, literally, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But
there are other ballots you can vote on in California
absolutely.
that are important, right?
Absolutely.
Why do you think your vote doesn't matter at all?
Well, I mean, I could be proven wrong in a few short weeks. But just because California's
so deep blue.
Polls could be the media could be, shifting to the left and owned by the left. But I mean, some polls are saying that it's somewhere like
California is just an electoral head start for the Democrats.
Are favoring Trump.
Okay, so you're just saying because you have a state that's going to outweigh your vote. That's what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is then, so for me as somebody who's researching, I sat down to lunch or to breakfast with a good friend on Thursday, and we talked for about 2 or 3 hours about just this whole kind of political fiasco. And he's actually going to come on in a couple of weeks and talk with us. I'm pretty excited. So my idea and a lot of my questions, right, I'm trying to identify my bias and where I come from and what I hold as valuable, right, issues. I try not to be a single issue voter, right? I'm trying my best to look beyond as somebody who wants to be informed but kind of feels overwhelmed, doesn't know where to start, because I look at the status of inner cities for the last 30 years haven't been great, and Democrats are kind of in control of that. And education hasn't been great, but then Republicans also slash funding whenever it comes through the House. So I keep kind of feeling like I throw up my hands and then I just go watch Top Gear. And so when I talk to somebody who's well informed, they talk about the value of identifying biases. And my dad is a big believer in this, about how everybody needs to go out and vote, right? After coming from a country where he has seen school teachers like die, literally protecting ballot boxes and stuff, it's like we're not allowed to take that for granted, you know? So I feel like I kind of have this moral imperative as somebody who lives in this country to vote. And so is there a way that you think we can use Scripture to better inform our current day politics and in these movements and environments that we're kind of in? Is there a way that you feel like Scripture leans to when we're talking about this kind of stuff, or do you feel like the totality of Scripture is apolitical? Where do we land in this realm?
I used to be the exact opposite of this, but I can't help but feeling that the answer is mostly no, the way you're framing the question.
Okay. Is there a better way to frame it? Am I framing it incorrectly?
I mean, I don't think you're doing a poor job. I think you're asking a question a lot of people ask. For me, it's like, okay, let's take abortion, right? So people say, well, how will I vote on abortion? What's the biblical answer? You come up with whatever you think is
Psalms.
Right? You come up with a biblical answer, and then you impose it in voting. But I would say that if you feel that strongly about this, then the biblical thing to do is to address it more directly than through the voting system.
So what would be an example, a counterexample of through just the voting system?
Get your church to develop some kind of local charitable situation where they give an alternative to abortion, where if you feel like you're a young lady that's the only option or the best option for you, that there's a local church that will give you an alternative to that. If that's your position on abortion, that's the Christian answer to that. It's not politics.
Okay.
So you're saying that with real issues, voting is ineffective.
I would say if you're trying to exercise Christian values, it is. I don't think Christian values can be very well opposed to the political system. I think politics can be done through the political system.
Okay. But so you're making like a hard and fast distinction, and this is good. This is helpful for somebody like me who I'm 10 years younger than you guys. So this is like, well, this is only the third election I've gotten to participate in, and it's a dumpster fire. It's a Trumpster fire.
Let me put it this
nice.
way. Let me defend myself through an example here. The government is nothing but an institution, a body, a corporate body, essentially. In the actual
body of Christ.
I don't mean corporate as in it's like an S corp or something like that. I mean that it's a corporate
group of people.
It's a group of people. So is Microsoft, right? So no, but you don't say to yourself,
what's
the Christian way that I can sort of infiltrate Microsoft and impose my Christian values upon them? No, Microsoft has Microsoft's business. And the way that Microsoft should operate is according to Microsoft's principles and goals and methods within what's.
But isn't that kind of comparing apples to oranges?
Yeah, but Microsoft doesn't make laws that affect my life.
Right, and so isn't that? I mean, doesn't that analogy kind of fall short, or am I pushing the? I mean, I know all analogies break down if you push them far enough.
To a degree, Microsoft does affect our lives.
I mean, they don't legislate my morality.
Right. But the point I'm making though is that we can still, like, on any given issue, we can operate outside of Microsoft. If I don't like what Microsoft is doing, I can create OpenOffice, which people did, and it's an alternative to anything Microsoft does.
But if I don't like what the government's doing and I try and do something, I can go to jail.
Yeah, but does But I'm talking about as far as imposing like Christian ethics and Christian morals. I think that doesn't make.
But the point there doesn't connect. The government's in the business of law, and law is kind of intertwined with morality, and morality is affected by our Christianity.
I would disagree with those steps those proposals.
Okay, I mean, so what would be the response to that then? Because I'm inclined to see it that way also. So how do we parse that out in a way that's valuable, but also effective?
You can still do politics and have a vision for what government is, but the thing is if you're first and foremost trying to impose Christian ideals, I don't think Christian ideals fit within politics.
Okay,
I mean, I'm saying if that is what your goal is, if your goal is to impose Christianity, I don't think
into the political system.
I don't think via the political system is an effective way to impose Christianity. I think being an alternative to the political system is where Christianity shines
the most.
Right.
So,
and there's overlap. I mean, Chris brings up, moral choices and laws. I mean, there's overlap of things that sound like Christian ethics and that align with Christian ethics. And we want, as a Christian, these things to happen, these laws to be passed, these guidelines for moral living to be there. But that doesn't make all governmental systems in line with Christianity, and we shouldn't try to force them to do that. I mean, I remember when someone that I respected, said that they wouldn't mind, a Christian-run state, a Christian-run government, that all of the laws of the country come from the biblical laws.
Including stoning people.
I think that would be it'd be very challenging and very difficult.
But what are laws other than trying to make people live a certain way?
Right. There's some type of collectivism that we have to establish, right, in a society, that we all have to play by at least some baseline set of rules. So the question becomes, which baseline set should we play with?
But as far as the New Testament goes, Christian morality is something somebody chooses for oneself. It's not one that is imposed upon non-Christians. Paul says, I mean, who am I to judge those who are outside the church? It's none of his business. Christian morality is one that one enters into via acceptance of Christ as Lord, but you accept it. It doesn't get imposed upon you. And I think when we understand that and we try to develop, when we try to act based on our Christian morals outside of the political system, I think we do very well. And I think when we try to operate within the political system with strong Christian stances, we end up damaging the church. We end up creating a bad reputation. We get Mike Huckabee, right? And Mike Huckabee might have done 100 good things, but frankly, he's also kind of ruined the reputation for the church for many other people. I can't speak for his whole career or anything like that, but I know of people who will never be Christian because of a Mike Huckabee, right? And so, yeah, I don't think the church shines within the political system. It shines as an alternative to the political system. Which, I mean, Chris, wouldn't you prefer an alternative to a government system?
That's exactly the thing. But what I'm getting is we take a lot of heat, I think, as Christians for this.
Right.
But I think to some extent everybody is doing it.
Right.
Look at California. They're trying to pass a soda tax now. So basically they're trying to change the way people like Josh and I drink.
For good reasoning.
For our own good. Yeah, because it's for your good. Or it's basically somebody trying to push their morals and their lifestyle on me.
Right.
Right.
And so I do get tired of us as Christians getting flack for something that basically everybody's doing.
Yeah, and in case people are sort of scoffing at an example, I mean, right now in San Francisco, there's essentially a bad food tax. If you eat fast food in San Francisco, you get an extra 10% added to your bill. My favorite pizza place is in San Francisco, and I always forget.
Is that Pachi's?
Yeah, Pachi's. And I always forget that I'm going to pay 20% in taxes instead of 10%.
That's why their bills are always so stinking.
What do they do with this tax? It goes to unhealthy food awareness?
It's an unhealtty food tax.
Where does the money collected go to?
I have no idea. It's collected by the city.
Thanks a lot, Dianne Feinstein.
See, so much of these government laws are about legislating morality or attempting to. Trying to make you live a certain way or be a certain way.
Exactly.
And I don't want Christians doing it. I wouldn't want to live in a Christian nation because, God forbid, it'd be a denomination that I wasn't a member of.
right. Or theological interpretation of the Bible that you disagree with.
But I resent
the fundamentalists would win that.
I resent other people pushing their beliefs in the same manner, but somehow they're so righteous because it's not a specifically religious belief.
Right.
Right. So you almost feel like Christians kind of get a bad rap when it comes to how little or how much we want our politics to match our ethics.
Because I feel like everybody's pushing their beliefs in election season.
Yeah.
So this is probably a pretty good stopping point. What are we at time-wise?
24 minutes.
Okay, good. So this election, you said you are abstaining?
Yes.
That is your vote choice?
I am very conflicted right now.
Okay. Chris, abstaining?
As always.
And I am currently in the conflict market as well. So
this is terrible.
James and I we are probably going to do some body wrestling.
Obi-Wan, you're my only hope.
Vote for Jimmy. He writes himself in. So that way he gets 2 votes.
That would also be troubling.
CNN, we're not all decided.
At least he's honest.
Don't know what they're doing.
I am going to oil wrestle James for control of the Senate.
You and James should write each other in.
Okay.
And that'd be a waste of a vote.
Well,
James should not vote
be
for
more
me.
fun than abstaining.
And so
until then, we're gonna eat some mushrooms.
no, that's
Yeah.
gross.
Check out our Faith Edible video where we ate wild mushrooms and see what happened.
And from there, be sure to follow us at faithandwhatever.com. You can find us on facebook.com/faithandwhatever.
Tingling.
I'm at Josh_Carmen. Garrett is at TStudentLife. Jamothy is at James Ewell. And Chris is at Marion Ranch. Thanks so much. Adios.